All right, new Monday. Today will be short but sweet.
Sure. Another short but sweet.
Another short but sweet. Mike Farrell is very popular. I'm less popular.
Well, I try to schedule everything around this. So when you slide in at 12:20, what am I going to do?
It's my fault, 100%. I had my computer. I ran a pickleball event. One of the days was canceled from my event in September. I had to do the mixed doubles makeup yesterday. So I had my computer, like I do the stuff from my computer at the event, and so I had it in my bag with all the other stuff with like cameras and different things, and I left it in the U-Haul I had. So I was like, I came down here and I'm like, all right, I'm getting set up. I have my lighting on, everything. And I'm like, oh wait, I don't have my computer. I do everything on my laptop.
Where's
So
the U-Haul?
it's outside, but
Oh,
I had to take everything out because the backpack was, I had stereo equipment, I had tables, all this crap in there.
no.
So I just pulled everything out, which took me about 10 minutes. And
Big
then
deal. Pickleball is a big deal, apparently.
it's fun, dude. It's
I
fun.
know. I got to get into it. It's just one of those things. Tom Brady just bought a pickleball team. It's going to be professional. It's going to be on TV more than ever. And, but anyways, so promotion wise, www.myfootballcamps.com/D1. Got some interesting news. We got a commitment. Carson Krueger
Yep.
is committed to Drake. And people will be like, well, that's not Alabama. No, it's not. Kids who commit to Alabama don't need promotion. What it is, it's about getting your education paid for, getting you to play college football at the college level, and then see where you go from there. And with the portal, it doesn't matter. Look at the kids from an Incarnate Word. Cameron Ward, Bailey Zappi. Bailey Zappi is a starting quarterback in the NFL, started FCS. So, but the other exciting news, Gavin Marshallek got his first varsity. He led his first comeback in varsity. They played a team that wins the state championship all the time. He started off this season as a third string. Now he's the starter, and they won 35-21 over a team that's beaten them, 14 in a row. So it just shows, you need an opportunity. When you get your opportunity, it can't be too big for you. You have to go out there and perform. And if you do that, good things are going to happen. Whether you're overlooked, Krueger sitting behind Cade Klubnik at Clemson, for 2 years in high school, or whether you're a young kid like Gavin, who's, just starting off in his career and waiting for his opportunity and making the most of it.
Yeah, I can't wait to do that video too about him. It's so exciting because you know what else it is? The kids that are in the 6-month program, they know as they do good things, they have someone that's going to then back up. It doesn't go into space. Let's put it like that.
It's not a
It doesn't
vacuum.
go into space, right? Like in the old days, and I'll go back to the old days because I think this was a big deal, much bigger than people realize. When you had newspapers, and you remember this probably when you were in high school, right?
Yep.
You did something, it was in a newspaper. It would say, like, Dave Schumann, 9-yard run, Dave Schumann, 45-yard run. I went to Saddlebrook High School, and we were pretty good, but then my senior were terrible. But it would still say, okay, Saddlebrook lost 21-14. So-and-so from so-and-so did this, and this, and Dave Schumann rushed for 2 touchdowns and 120 yards. And so those things, as far as reinforcement that you're on the right path, no matter how good your team is doing or not, right, it was very, very valuable as a player. You got to see what other kids were doing, and you knew what you were doing, right? But now, because newspapers aren't a big deal, it's in this space called the internet, right? And so the only thing you really see is who follows you and who doesn't follow you. And everybody follows guys that have 9,000 offers, right? So you don't realize how good you're doing. You may be doing fantastic, and other people may not realize it. That's what to me is so valuable about this. This is like a sidebar value, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, as you mentioned, I mean, you could do great things. I mean, we had the Groover kid. Every one of his touchdowns probably went out from his Twitter account and somebody else's Twitter account, and nobody saw it. And then we put out every one of his touchdowns, and everybody sees it. It's just the way it is. I just retweeted Marshall X, tweet, and we'll do a separate video on his success. And it's funny too because Groover just lost 4 injured wide receivers, so he just had to run the ball a billion times. And it just shows his versatility. We have that video now. And we're going to put that out, and it doesn't matter that he's already committed. I don't care.
And you know what, and he lost. Now his coach is a friend of mine, and his coach had to step down. Long time, very well known coach in Texas. Turned around Lake Travis back in the we had Garrett Gilbert, those guys, and he had to step down this past week because of personal reasons, something going on with his family. Great, fantastic guy. Like just, from running events became a good friend. Right. So, so Groover's doing all this in really just spectacular fashion. That's why the kudos to him, but it was great. He got us at the right time. The summer, we were able to start putting stuff out with him, and normally 2023 would be difficult. Okay, but he got us. We got ahead of it. So as he started to strike gold with his play, we were able to be on top of it. And look at, I mean, to me, he lands at Drake. Like that's just fantastic because he may have landed nowhere with a scholarship, and that's the great part about it. He would landed somewhere because of his play, but landed at a place that's an FCS now because of the additional opportunity. Everything combined really helped him.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, there's so many different circumstances, whether you're sitting behind somebody who's great or you're just starting off or you're third string or, I look at a journey of not just a quarterback, but any player. When you're looking at this past weekend, and we're going to sort of segue into this past weekend, but, look at Hendon Hooker. Okay, so Hendon Hooker is a 3-star kid from North Carolina, committed to Virginia Tech, started off okay there and then regressed, had some physical issues, didn't feel he was supported by the Virginia Tech staff in a lot of things that he did, transfers to Tennessee, gets the right coach, and now he's a Heisman candidate. Now, this isn't a no-star kid with no offers. This is a 3-star kid, but his journey wasn't a straight line. It wasn't the way he planned it. And I don't think anything ever is. So when you look at some of these, I mean, the top 3 passers this past weekend in college football are all transfers, all of them. You're not going to have a linear path to success, unless you're Trevor Lawrence and you're that good. Even Justin Fields, who's not struggling with the Bears now because they have no talent, but he had to transfer. So it's not where you start; it's where you finish. So if you can get an FCS scholarship, or if you can get a low-level D1 scholarship, or you get a Division II scholarship, whatever, it's what you do with it from that point. And that's really what it's about. We're not promising anything. We're not promising, anything over your head as far as your ability. We're just promising that you'll get looked at, and then it's up to you. I mean, I'm going to follow him. Obviously, it's going to be interesting. I've never followed Drake football ever. I will now, and it'll be kind of interesting, and Drake has a kid who is Eric Saubert, played for
he was a great player.
Yeah. Played for the Falcons and, had a run in the NFL. You can come from anywhere. It doesn't matter. They'll find you. So that was kind of interesting because that's our first commitment, right?
First commitment. Yep.
Yeah. And this has only been around for a few months. So it's kind of like just fun to see and celebrate in that. And who knows, that commitment itself, other schools could still swoop in. That's why we're going to keep promoting them. And options are great. But I think there's a loyalty factor too that, somebody believes in you, you're going to want to play that much more for them, that much harder for them. And, you look at Josh Allen and his journey to JUCO to Wyoming to now arguably the best quarterback in the NFL. They were all people who believed in him that sent him on that journey, and Justin Herbert sort of the same way. Now, he went to Oregon, but he wasn't heavily recruited.
Aaron Rodgers,
JUCO kid, nobody wanted, it's just Russell Wilson, recruited as a wide receiver, on and on and on. There's success stories. And honestly, if you don't have to overcome stuff, and Tom Brady's a great example of this, if you don't have to overcome stuff, maybe you'd never be great. He was a 6th-round pick. You really need that sort of, you need the chance coupled with the intensity of being overlooked. And I think that's kind of the group of kids we've got. They're going to get a chance because of this program. And now they're just going to take it to wherever they take it. So, but speaking of that, transfers and little known recruits, Jalen Hyatt, the kid who caught 5 touchdown passes against Alabama, guess where he wanted to go to school? Clemson. Guess who didn't want him? Clemson. He's from South Carolina, and he ended up at Tennessee. And now he had one of the most historic games in the history of college football against Alabama, where they gave up more than 50 points for the first time since 1907. And Tennessee broke a 15-game losing streak to Bama. So that was pretty exciting this weekend. That game was amazing.
Amazing game. Hooker over and over and over. He's my son's, by the way, favorite player in college football. At this age, 7 years old, they all like the NFL, right? But he'll watch some college football. He doesn't yet understand everything there. All he ever talks about, because Tennessee early in the season had I can't remember who it was again, but he had a great game against them. I think it was one of the early wins. They had a big win, and he played great, and we happened to be watching that game, and he goes, "That guy's awesome. He runs, he throws." And then when they played Alabama again, it was just unbelievable how, first of all, Heupel being able to do something that's been very difficult in Tennessee. A lot of guys who are quote-unquote good coaches have come in there and not being able to rally the team, get the fans behind them, because the fans in Tennessee are tough, and be able to win games all at the same time. Like, just those 3 things have been very difficult for good quote-unquote coaches to be able to do in Tennessee. And he's done all 3 of those in a short time period with arguably not as highly rated players. He has a few, but not as highly rated players. And you feel that old mystique coming back with Tennessee, watching it. Like when Bill Fulmer's group was in their heyday with T. Martin and Peyton Manning and all those guys when they had good teams. But Heupel has something different about him, man, that he brings that Oklahoma offense where he was coached by Leach. He melts a lot of different styles together, which I think is really, really impressive from an offensive standpoint. He obviously, I don't know his, what he was as far as SAT score, but he seems to be a fantastic football mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And he wasn't really, when he was hired, Danny White came from UCF, became the new athletic director when Philip Fulmer, stepped down and all this stuff. He wasn't highly coveted or thought of at UCF because he was following Scott Frost, and Scott Frost won that mythical national title that year and all that stuff. So it wasn't even like he was, a guy that everybody's first choice. So it was similar to Butch Jones, similar to, Jeremy Pruitt. So it's a real surprise that he's been this good. His offenses were always good there, but to take it to this level in the SEC, to make Hooker a guy who, struggled at Virginia Tech off and on, to a 3-interception guy last season, to a guy who makes very few mistakes. He threw a pick this week, but just an unbelievable Heisman candidate. Just shows he knows quarterbacks, he knows offense. That offense, it's not complex. It's situational, it's matchup. And the stunning thing about it was that the defensive coordinator's his name's evading me at this point in time for Alabama. didn't adjust properly. If I saw Jalen High on one more deep slant wide open, the safety play, the cornerback play from
Golding, is it?
Alabama, it's just not what you expect from Nick Saban at all.
Yeah, the defensive, is it Golding that's the defensive coordinator
Yeah,
there?
People,
Uh,
yeah, that.
it definitely is not. And Tennessee uses space so well. They do a great job of using space. The quarterback has an understanding of he has within that offense has a really good understanding of when to take off and when to try to make a play. Which is like he doesn't always just take off. Like he really
Eyes
tries to make a play.
downfield. Just like Bryce Young, man.
Yeah,
These guys have the ability to keep their eyes downfield while scrambling, which is very, very hard to do and teach.
very, very hard, and they have a nice feel. They know when the escape moment is, right. Like he knows time to escape, but he's trying to find guys right up until that moment that it's time to escape. So when he does escape, he really, it looks like he really can run for acres because of it. But he has such good timing on it. But yeah, it's so honestly, I think it's the best thing for college football. Like, obviously Nick Saban is a legend and all these things, but there's times when I've rooted for them, but there's also times like this when I was like, I would love to see Tennessee win this game because it'd be so great for college football to have another team in the mix that can do something.
Yeah, because people hate Alabama just because they win all the time and they've won so much. So there's this feeling of, anybody that beats them is a big deal and it's great. And I don't find myself that way at all. Rooting for or against, even though I'm tired of Alabama being great. There's a respect there where it's like, if Alabama wins, when that scoop and score occurred, I think it was Dallas Turner who picked it up on the RPO that didn't work out. I'm like, here we go again. Tennessee was just up 7. Now they're down 7. It can happen that fast. But they rebounded and came back from that. And then Alabama, for some reason, threw the ball 3 times and left time on the clock after the missed field goal. And it was different feel. I thought in that moment when they gave up the defensive touchdown, they could have folded and they didn't. And if they did, if Alabama won that football game, my thought process would have been, well, here we go again. I mean, Tennessee at least played good and gives their team some hope, but 16 in a row to Alabama, it's just the way it is. But with them winning, it just changes a lot of things and makes things pretty exciting. You've got UGA coming up for them. You might have a rematch if they beat UGA in the SEC championship game with Alabama. I mean, there's just going to be some fun football coming up. And I think the Big Ten the same way because, Penn State, I didn't expect them to win that football game against Michigan, but I expected them to be in the game. And they were until they weren't, until their defense just wore down. And they started Donovan Edwards, 67-yard run, Blake Corum, 61-yard run, and that offense just wore them down. And they just played much more physical than Penn State was able to handle. So now I'm thinking in the Big Ten, as you mentioned, Tennessee is now a threat in the SEC. Michigan was a threat last year. They went to the playoff, but now I think they could give Ohio State a lot of problems. And I didn't think that heading into this game.
I think the running game that they have, it's one of these things that like when everybody ran the ball, all of a sudden someone passed, let's say like 10 to 15 years ago, a team that passed had like this chance where they could win at any time because of the fact that they could throw and they could get down the field quickly. Now everybody throws, right? So a team who can run the ball effectively, it's almost like the reverse effect is that if you struggle passing wise, if they could do some stuff defensively and make a couple of plays here and there, and now they're running the ball and a Corum breaks off a 61-yard run, I would say there's nothing worse to a defense than when a team is running the ball on you and there is just nothing you can do about it. It's the most deflating thing because they're just wearing out, and then all of a sudden, one guy breaks off a run, another guy breaks off a run. Corum seems to always break the nail in the coffin runs off. Like he's great at that. Like when you start to wear down and you bring him, he comes in and puts that foot in the ground and goes north. And guys who've been chasing people over and over again, they just either over pursue or under pursue, and he finds it, and he gets there.
Yeah. And the schedule, Michigan State doesn't look that great. They beat Wisconsin. Nebraska's not good. Rutgers isn't good. Illinois is good this season, but do we really think they can handle Michigan's? Now you're talking about the beginning of this season when you looked at the schedule, the Colorado State, Hawaii, UConn were all wins. I mean, there's just no way you could lose to those football teams. They're three of the worst football teams in college football. But at Iowa looked like it could be a troublesome game. And they ended up winning, and it was close. They struggled a little bit with Indiana, but they ended up winning by 21. They struggled with Maryland, which was kind of a surprise. But Penn State, you thought this would be a struggle. It isn't. So now you could have an undefeated Michigan team against an undefeated Ohio State team November 26th, at Ohio State, when Ohio State wants revenge from losing last year. That's going to be really good for college football. But now what we sort of see is Penn State is their ceiling mid-tier Big Ten. They were undefeated, top 10 team. They go into the Big House, they get destroyed. So now what do we think of James Franklin? What do we think of the expectations at Penn State? Do we ever think that they're going to break through in the Big Ten? 2016 was the last time they did, and they got robbed of the playoff. And we're in 2022 now. And I'm not really sure if Penn State is a threat nationally in any regard.
Well, on a national level, I think it's going to be. I think Franklin's done a really. Penn State's I think still is a somewhat difficult place to get all the guys you need to get there for multiple reasons. There's still a stigma. I don't care what people say. Like when people are choosing a school. Look, the Pennsylvania kids, probably for the most part, Pennsylvania and Ohio kids, and maybe some Jersey kids that go there, for the most part, probably are willing to go there regardless, just because of the history. But when you get outside of that area, which they need a few guys from outside that area to fulfill things, that stigma can stop, I think, some of the players they may need to get from outside that area. And I think that's a little bit of an issue. So I don't know if I don't think that's on Franklin at all. I think it's going to be a little while before that completely goes away. People still talk about it.
Right.
So I think he's done a great job in spite of that. And obviously Bill O'Brien, even though I don't think he's the greatest coach, definitely deserves a ton of credit for holding that place together.
Yeah.
To get it to that point. But I think that if a kid's going to play in the north, okay, and in the cold weather and stuff, because people can move now much easier, they're picking seems to be a few places, right? And you have to be one of those few. And it could rotate around. Obviously, Ohio State's been that way for a while.
Always. Yep.
Right. But and Michigan, for the most part, here and there. I mean,
Notre Dame here and there.
Notre Dame. So that's what brings me to Notre Dame. Losing to Stanford, if I'm not correct, 2-4 Stanford, not a great Stanford team. There's barely scoring any points. Stanford likes to not score. Well, I know they don't like to not score,
but they like to play that slow, physical.
Yeah, they're double tight ends. Yeah. They're a fullback, double tight ends.
Right.
So that's the kind of game you're going to get into. But Notre Dame struggled to score to put themselves in a position of having forced Stanford to open up, which they weren't able to do. There's a lot of questions there, and Notre Dame's quick fix solution may come back to haunt them. It probably is already, I guess, but. It's going to kill them in recruiting. All that great recruiting they were having. 3-3 Notre Dame.
Yeah, and 2 home losses. Stanford hadn't won an FBS game in 11 tries. They're not a good football team. Marshall shouldn't be beating Notre Dame at home. The losses aren't good. And the confidence that Marcus Freeman sort of showed in the Ohio State game, where they were in that game and he looked like he had it together, that's gone. I mean, he looked really perplexed against Stanford. He didn't really have a solution for them. And as I mentioned, I mean, they were missing their best running back. I mean, Emmitt Smith's kid, E.J. Smith's out for the year. Tanner McKee is a good quarterback, projected at the pro level, like the dude for the Texans, but not an elite college quarterback. It just isn't a good team to lose to. So, again, it goes back to, he's a good recruiter. He's a player's coach, but is he a good coach? Same thing with Venable. Venable's a good recruiter. He's a good defensive coordinator, but is he a good head coach? Now, they beat Kansas, but Kansas was missing their starting quarterback, and it was at Oklahoma. I mean, they shouldn't lose that football game. But these type of hires are dangerous. If you don't hire someone with experience, that's why Nebraska and Wisconsin have to really look at this carefully. Paul Chryst was maybe fired for Jim Leonard. Jim Leonard just lost. Wisconsin just lost a game this weekend. He may not be ready. And Nebraska, you have to hire someone with head coaching experience. And I say Scott Frost didn't really have a lot. He was only at UCF for like 2 years, and he kind of lucked into that undefeated season. So in hindsight, he wasn't experienced. You got to get guys that have been there, done that, know what to do when the chips are down, and don't panic and freak out. And I think that's, unfortunately, Notre Dame and Oklahoma have two guys that are just learning on the job. And at those programs, you don't learn on a job. Boosters are not going to be happy with this loss for Notre Dame. I'm not going to say ever that he'll be fired at the end of this season.
No, I don't think he will.
Well, first of all, Notre Dame's so haughty-taughty. They think so much of themselves. Imagine firing a coach after one season. No, they're going to ride this out, Ty Willingham style, Charlie Weiss style, long after it's clear that this isn't a fit.
Even Bob Davies, dude. I remember when Bob Davies replaced Lou Holtz, right? They were Lou Holtz obviously won a national championship. Then all of a sudden they were mad at Lou Holtz because Lou Holtz wanted to keep getting players in, and they were like, this book came out and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden they pump the brakes. Lou Holtz leaves. They get Bob Davies in, which was just one of the worst hires in the history of Notre Dame. Not even wins and losses. I mean, that was not that great. But like for the culture of Notre Dame football program, it set them back, which led to a litany of other decisions that were bad post Bob Davie. And I worry that after Brian Kelly, it seems a lot similar to he's kind of like Lou Holtz is more personable than Brian Kelly, but it's the same thing. Won a bunch of games, put them in a great position, and then all of a sudden people aren't happy about out of nowhere they're not happy about it. Oh, we don't want Brian Kelly, who's probably has a 90% winning percentage. Okay, we got to find somebody else, and he leaves us, right? I feel like if Brian Kelly thought that he was adequately supported in the long run there from the fan base, just like I think Lou Holtz got into that situation, they would have stayed there as long as they possibly could and had a chance to win a national championship if they were given the things they needed, right? But they got to a point. Lou Holtz got to that point. Brian Kelly got to the point where he was just like, enough. And Notre Dame does that. Why do they do that? Do you know? Why do they do that?
It's arrogance. I mean, at least Lou Holtz had academic leniency. They were able to get kids in that weren't, when Bob Davie was hired, one of the famous stories is Carson Palmer wasn't accepted academically. And this is a, quarterback with good grades, that everybody in the world could take except for Notre Dame. They wouldn't allow him in. So after Lou Holtz left, all the haughty-taughty people and all the stuck-up people at Notre Dame said, we're not, no leniency for academics ever again. And they haven't changed on that. And Brian Kelly had to deal with that, and he overcame it. But he got frustrated with it because people want top 5 recruiting classes, but out of the top 300 kids in the country, you can only recruit 180 of them because more than half, less than half of them have, academic standards to go to Notre Dame. The arrogance of not going in a conference. I don't care who you are. If you're a head football coach and you play the same teams over and over again every year, there's an advantage. Notre Dame this season alone, where is it? They played a Big Ten team so far, a Sun Belt team, a future Big 12 team, 2 Pac-12 teams, and an ACC team. Okay, you can't do that. You have to have regularity in a conference. You have to know your divisional opponents. You have to know their tendencies. You have to know this and that and get a familiarity for them so that if you're in the ACC and you play Pitt every year, you know what to expect. You can't just have an independent schedule every year and expect to be successful. But they're too arrogant to join a conference because they don't need the money. They can make the money on their own. And they're Notre Dame. We're too good for that. Well, guess what? It's going to hurt you. The academics and recruiting are going to hurt you. You just got lucky that Brian Kelly was a great coach. Great coach. You know, championship game, 2 playoffs. That's not going to happen again unless they lower their standards a little bit. Do you want to be an Ivy League school academically, or do you want to be a college football power? Because you can't be both. Stanford tried it. They continue to try it. They suck, and they just beat you. So I think that's the problem, and that's why the coaches get frustrated, the good ones. And then if you hire a bad one, and I'm not saying Marcus Freeman's a bad coach, I'm just saying he's over his head, then you're going to have seasons like this. Then all those rich boosters that are all the ones that are clamoring for you to have these academic standards of Notre Dame, and it's a 40-year decision instead of a 4-year decision, all that garbage that they put out there because they have a Notre Dame degree and they think they're super smart, they get upset. Well, you're the reason for it. If you could lower your standards academically slightly, I'm not saying take every kid with a pulse. You know, I'm not take kids with 600 SETs, but just lower them a little bit. And get in a conference, I think you could change a lot of this stuff, but they won't.
I mean, focus more on the GPA. Like I always say, like if a kid has a good GPA, he's at least is willing to do some work for their schooling, you know. But they're not at a point where they're willing to do that, and that's
They get what they deserve.
Yeah, it's gonna be, and you know, I think this whole like good riddance, this coach leaves, he wasn't that good anyway. No, I think your assessment should be this guy was great. How can we find someone that has some of these characteristics that he had that made him great? Figure out what made Brian Kelly great. Okay, you want a guy that's more personable like Marcus Freeman. Fine, but you want Marcus Freeman with the experience of Brian Kelly, right? So,
yeah,
where is that guy? Because the guy's there. You just got to go and find
him. Somewhere. And people get butthurt that the coaches leave. You know, Oklahoma, we don't need Lincoln Riley. Well, guess what? You do. He went to the playoff 3 of 5 years. Oh, we were on the down last year. We won 11 games, but we didn't make the playoff. Great. Now look at you. You suck. You know, you beat Kansas. Great. But you've lost 3 straight games. You got destroyed by Texas. Your program's in disarray. You needed Lincoln Riley. He left. So, you know, figure it out from there and get another guy who's got experience, who would be intrigued by the Oklahoma job, who has experience, rather than just sort of wing it and try to get a defense coordinator and hope and roll the dice. And that's what both of these programs are doing. But I do have a quick out at one.
I'll let you go.
But, you know, Tennessee, you know, being good, Michigan being a threat to Ohio State, you know, even to some level, Notre Dame sucking. It's all good for college football because everybody loves it. You know, I mean, Notre Dame is 90% of the people who tune in for Notre Dame games are hoping they lose. So college football is in a really good place. This past weekend was amazing. We didn't even talk about TCU, Oklahoma State, on and on. Great weekend. Next weekend will be great too. But go to myfootballcamps.com/D1. I got some people calling you. I sent you a message about it.
Yep.
You know, some people will be calling you. And again, it takes a lot of comfort. You have to get comfortable with us. And once you're comfortable with us, then you're happy. I think, you know, I'm getting text messages from parents who are in this program all the time telling me what the kid did and all this stuff. And always responsive to them, always this, that, and the other, retweeting everything they do. But you got to get comfortable with us because you don't trust us at first. I mean, you don't know us. But if you get to know us, you're going to trust us and you're going to have some success with this program. So sign up. Keep an eye on your phone I'm going to keep sending people to call you. I don't like talking to people on the phone.
Yeah, no,
So I just send them to you.
You got it. We'll see you next week. Great talk, and enjoy your week, everybody. Mike, I'll see you later.
See ya.